When Caitlin Clark talks about basketball, the conversation rarely stays limited to points, assists, or wins. Her presence has already pushed the women's game into a different cultural lane, where performance, identity, and business intersect in real time.
You said that you're wearing the new kicks coming up this season. Let's get back to Nike though. I gotta ask some questions because I'm such a huge sneaker fan.
So when she opened up about her new Nike ad, the long-term vision behind a potential signature shoe, and the quieter team traditions that ground her amid the noise, it wasn't just a brand moment or a feel-good interview. It was a snapshot of how a generational athlete navigates fame while trying not to let it hollow out the things that made her dangerous in the first place. The Nike ad itself didn't land like a typical endorsement spot. It wasn't built around polish or perfection. It leaned into edge, repetition, and pressure. Clark has always been at her most compelling when she's portrayed not as untouchable, but as relentless. That tone mattered. In a landscape where women athletes have often been marketed as inspirational before they're allowed to be dominant, the ad flipped the emphasis. The message wasn't "look how far she's come." It was "this is what happens when you don't blink." Clark didn't talk about the ad as something that changed her identity. She talked about it as something that reflected what already existed.
How long in advance has it been, or like when does it all start? Do they come to you with a shoe, a bunch of shoes? Do you kind of get to tweak them here and there? How is that process?
Honestly, the process started at the end of my senior year when I was at Iowa because I was deciding what shoe company I was going to go with. I think it's honestly been like probably one of the coolest things I've got to do.
That distinction says a lot about how carefully she's protecting her core. For Nike, this partnership represents more than just attaching a swoosh to the hottest name in basketball. Nike is betting on longevity, not virality. Clark understands that, and her comments made it clear she's thinking in decades, not seasons. When she discussed the idea of a signature shoe, she didn't frame it as a trophy or an arrival point. She framed it as responsibility. That's rare. Signature shoes are often treated as validation, a symbol that you've made it. Clark talked about it as something that has to mean something to kids who play like her, shoot like her, and feel like outsiders until the ball is in their hands. What stood out most was how grounded her thinking was. She acknowledged the magnitude of a signature shoe without romanticizing it. She spoke about design conversations not in terms of flash, but function, comfort, support, durability. She kept returning to the idea that if her name is on something, it has to work at the highest level, not just look good in photos. That mindset mirrors her game. Deep threes get the attention, but her conditioning, her footwork, and her stamina are what make the highlights possible. The shoe, in her mind, has to follow the same logic. Clark's relationship with Nike also reflects a broader shift in how women athletes are asserting control over their narratives. This isn't about being grateful for an opportunity. It's about collaboration. She talked about being listened to, about having input, about not feeling rushed into something that doesn't align with where she is yet. That patience is strategic. The market might be ready for a Caitlin Clark signature shoe tomorrow, but she's clearly more interested in releasing something when it can't be dismissed as hype-driven or premature. In a culture obsessed with immediacy, that restraint is power. Yet for all the talk about ads and shoes, the most revealing parts of her reflections came when she shifted to team traditions. Away from cameras and contracts, Clark still orients herself around routine. Shared meals. Locker room rituals. Inside jokes that never make it to social media. She spoke about these things with the same seriousness she gives to preparation. That's not accidental. For athletes under constant scrutiny, tradition becomes a form of insulation. It creates a space where you're not a brand or a headline, just a teammate. Clark emphasized how much she values those moments because they keep the game from becoming transactional. When everything around you is measured in clicks and conversions, tradition is one of the last things that belongs purely to the players. She talked about how those habits build trust, how they soften pressure, how they remind everyone that no matter how big the stage gets, basketball is still played by people who need connection. It's telling that she brought this up unprompted. It suggests she's actively resisting the isolating effects of superstardom. There's also an element of leadership embedded in how she described these traditions. Clark isn't the loudest voice in the room by default. She leads through consistency. Showing up early. Doing the same things the same way. Respecting the culture that existed before her while quietly raising the standard. When she talks about team rituals, she's really talking about continuity. About making sure the environment doesn't fracture under attention. That's a difficult balance for any young star, especially one whose presence changes everything instantly. Her comments also revealed an awareness of the broader implications of her visibility. Clark understands that her Nike ad and any future signature shoe won't just be consumed by fans, but dissected by critics. She knows that expectations for women athletes are often contradictory. Be dominant, but not arrogant. Be marketable, but not commercial. Be authentic, but never messy. Instead of trying to satisfy all of that, she's chosen to anchor herself in process. Ads come and go. Shoes release and fade. Habits last. What makes Clark's approach so compelling is that it doesn't feel defensive. She's not pushing back against fame or pretending it doesn't matter. She's simply integrating it into a framework that already existed. The same discipline that fuels her shooting reps now informs her brand decisions. The same attention to detail that shows up in game film now shows up in design conversations. There's no split between athlete and entrepreneur because she refuses to let one undermine the other. Her discussion of Nike also hinted at how she views legacy. Not as something declared, but something built quietly. She spoke about wanting young players to feel seen, especially those who don't fit traditional molds. Shooters who aren't the biggest. Guards who don't play above the rim. Kids who were told to pass instead of fire. In that sense, a signature shoe isn't about status. It's about permission. Permission to play boldly. Permission to take up space. Permission to trust your range. The ad, the shoe, the traditions, they all connect to that same theme. Control. Clark is choosing where to invest her energy. She's choosing what gets amplified and what stays private. She's choosing patience over pressure. That level of intentionality is rare in any athlete, let alone one so early in her professional career. It's also worth noting how seamlessly she moves between individual ambition and collective responsibility. When she talked about Nike, she used I. When she talked about the team, she used we. That linguistic shift matters. It reflects how she compartmentalizes without disconnecting. She understands that brands elevate individuals, but teams sustain them. The balance between those forces is where many stars stumble. Clark seems acutely aware of that risk and is managing it proactively. In a league and media environment eager to crown and consume, her steadiness stands out. She doesn't oversell. She doesn't rush. She doesn't pretend to have everything figured out. That honesty, paired with excellence, is what makes her so marketable without feeling manufactured. Nike didn't just choose a scorer. They chose someone who understands that influence is fragile if it isn't grounded. As women's basketball continues to expand into new commercial territory, Clark's choices will be studied closely. Not because she's flawless, but because she's intentional. Her Nike ad works because it aligns with how she actually plays. A future signature shoe will matter because it's being built with care, not urgency. Her team traditions matter because they remind her who she is when the noise gets loud. In the end, Caitlin Clark isn't trying to escape the moment. She's trying to survive it intact. That may be the most impressive part of her rise. Not the range. Not the records. But the refusal to let momentum dictate meaning. In a sports world that often confuses exposure with substance, Clark is quietly proving that you can have both, if you're willing to move at your own pace and protect the things that don't show up in ads.